Thank you for coming. I wanted to tell you that I met Amir at a conference and training session I attended in Paris, in Pixiu, because he was also dealing with the use of microchips for the retina. I met him. I thought he was really nice. I didn't have a clue who he was. And then I found out that, the Low Vision Congress is going to be held in Bilbao on Friday, so I just thought of the idea that we might bring him over here if he was coming to Bilbao. I contacted him and I found out he was going to Bilbao. And then I called him back and said, well, since you're flying in from Israel to Bilbao and you're flying via Barcelona, you might as well drop by. And that's how come we have him here. So thank you very much. Amir Amedi is the director of the Center for Brain Imaging. He's also a professor at the Department of Medical Neurobiology at Hebrew University. He has a PhD in computational neuroscience from Hebrew University. Is that in Tel Aviv? Yeah. And he's a postdoctoral and instructor of neurology at Harvard Med. He received the Krill Prize for Excellence in Scientific Research, also the prize from the Wolf Foundation, the International Human Frontiers Science Program Organization Career Development Award. That's a very long one, quite a mouthful. The JSMF Scholar Award in Understanding Human Cognition. And, generally speaking, he's an internationally acclaimed brain scientist with plenty of knowledge about the brain. He's been working for 15 years in the field of brain neuroplasticity and multisensory integration, and it's a real honor to have him here today, because it's quite the honor to have someone who is an amazing scientist and just an amazing person, too. So, go for it.
Muchas gracias, Carol. This is a big pleasure to be here again in Barcelona. And it's always wonderful to visit here and the beautiful people here. My best friend in the postdoctoral in Harvard was from Catalonia, Joan Capordón, a really nice neurologist, great neurologist. Actually, before I was in Barcelona, actually, my knowledge from Barcelona was, since it's late and we will do only part, we'll make it, I will tell you two stories about my knowledge of Barcelona and Spain. Catalan people and their, so one story is this Joan Camprodon was my office mate in Boston, and every month he would get a book, and I didn't understand why he's so excited from a book. But apparently what happened is that every month his mother used to take a big book and take the pages out and put inside jamon from here and send it by FedEx. And each time it will come, he would make a party with wine and jamon. And so this was my first contact of... After that, if I drink enough wine, I tell you the second story. It's a bit more crazy, but maybe now we start. So what I want to talk today is about how we see, okay? And usually we think about vision as that we have input from the eye and it's go to the brain and we see, right? But on the other hand, we know that in the brain, but on the other hand, you know, in the brain we have the number of the neurons in the brain is the same numbers of the stars in our galaxy, in the Milky Way galaxy. So it's a crazy amount of neurons, and 30% of them dedicated to vision. So why do we have so many neurons in the brain that deal with vision if it was just an input? And I will try to show you how the brain develops specialization for vision, and how in extreme cases, like when people born completely blind or lose their vision, we can leverage understanding of the brain and of the senses in order to help them with some creative technology. And at the same time, we try to understand the brain better. Basically, I'm a neuroscientist, a computational neuroscientist that try to understand the brain. But along the way, we got into a project that involves vision and blind people and low vision, learned a lot about the brain, but also tried to develop some technology to help blind people that would be cheap and accessible to all of them. So the take-home message of what I would try to show you in the presentation is that basically I would try to suggest a new theory about how the brain is organized. We used to think about the brain as a sensory machine. So we have visual cortex here and auditory cortex here and so on and so forth. And I would try to suggest this is not true. I would try to suggest there is computational models that usually do their operation in the visual system with vision, but they can do it with any sense. I would try to talk about how interacting between the senses is very important even for basic vision. And I think the most important and what I would start is this concept of critical periods. Studying vision, there is this still in the textbook, this concept of critical periods that was started actually by Hubel and Wiesel, their Nobel Prize winning work. The first part of this work, they were the first to put electrodes in V1 in primary visual cortex and record the responses there to light and to different stimuli. And the second part was their work about critical periods. And what they tried to suggest, what they showed is that if you do not get the proper input during the critical period window, you will never develop vision and you never develop selectivity in the brain, in the visual system, in this 30% of the number of neurons in the Milky Way, 10 in the 12 million neurons. If they don't receive the input in the right time, they will never be able to. We have a window that the brain needs to get the proper information. And what I will try to show you, both with the research we do in the lab and also with the congenital cataract project, is that this is not true anymore. And we should change this concept to the concept of reversible plasticity gradient. What it means, and I think it's very important for people that are dealing with rehab, this type of insights, because the concept of a reversible plasticity gradient means that we agree with Hubel and Wiesel that the brain is more plastic when you're day 1 and 1 year and 10 years than when you're 60, okay? So this we agree. There is a gradient. There is a lot of plasticity early and less plasticity late. But what I would try to show you is that using either non-invasive, very simple protocols, we can reverse this gradient and we can open critical periods and develop selectivities of almost everything that we know about the visual system and the areas in the visual system. Even in people that never had visual experience, whether they were born with cataract and never got proper visual input, or they have any other problem that make them congenitally blind, okay? So this is, again, we have now evidence for the last 15 years, and we publish now a lot of reviews, and I will try to share some of the work that we did on this. But it's still, in the textbook, it's still 99% still this concept, and I will try to share with you what is the evidence to suggest against it. So what I will try to ask in this lecture is what we know that in the brain, in the visual system, in this 30% of the 10 in the 12 neurons that we have in the brain, we have two types of areas. One type of areas are retinotopic areas, topographic. So they take a 2D image and they encode this information in a map so that neighboring neurons have different area in the visual field that responds. Yeah, this is textbook. So we have the fovea represented here and the periphery here, and we have the entire image duplicated in a map in our brain. Then we have all the two streams, the ventral stream and the dorsal stream. The ventral stream have further specializations for different things that are very important for us as humans. What are these things? We can have, I can maybe try to use this. We have specializations for things like navigation. That's the most ventral. This looking on the brain from below. Next to it for faces. Next to it for reading. Next to it for tools. And then here we have an area that dedicates to analyzing the body. All of this area, according to Hubel and Wiesel, the ocular dominance in the retinotopic areas and all these specializations in the fusiform face area, in the visual word from area, and so on and so forth, according to Hubel and Wiesel, you must get visual information when you are young, and you can argue if it's weeks or months or years, to develop this properly. And if it's true, then it's really a limit how much we can reprogram the brain if it not receive the right input. If we have amblyopia, if we have cataract, and so on and so forth. Okay? Okay, so the first line of evidence that something in this view of the brain is maybe not that simple is a work we did in 2001. And what we try to do is to look on this area that is doing tools and objects in vision. And we try to take congenitally blind, but also sighted people, and let them palpate objects and see whether they have a similar area for tools in the touch system. And we expected to get activity not in this visual green part of the brain, but in the yellow part of the brain that dedicate to the body, to the hands and to the body, yeah? So you can all close the eyes and get something to palpate. And what we got was very, very surprising. We got that the ventral stream of the visual system is responding the most to tactile object recognition. So it's the same area that is doing vision object recognition, also doing tactile object recognition. This is very strange. And what is even more interesting is that this area also was the peak activity in people that never had any visual experience. And then another very interesting result we got is that if you gave them the sound of the objects, so for example, a hammer, the sound of a hammer, or a meow of a cat, or a woof woof of a dog, all of this, there is no response there. So how can we explain this result of the ventral visual stream? And what we suggested is that maybe this area is not about vision per se. It's an area that what it's doing, it's building the geometry and the 3D shape of things in the world. Usually vision is very good to build this, and this is why it looks like a visual area. But if you do it with touch, you also can build the geometry of things and recognize objects. And this is true even if you never had visual experience, you still can build the 3D geometry. So maybe the ventral visual stream and this area LOC have nothing to do with vision per se, but it's basically an operator for doing something that is computational, that is enable us to do things. Usually vision is the best for doing this, but if we don't have it, or even if we never had it, we still get the same specialization. Okay? Now, by the way, why then it's not responding to auditory sounds? Well, the explanation is the following. Let's say tomorrow God decides to sweep the sounds of the cat and the dog. Yeah? So in the beginning, you look at the dog, and the dog is doing meow, meow. You say, this is very strange, right? And you look at the cat, and it's doing woof, woof. But if you go in the world, and all the time it's the same, the next time you hear a meow, meow, and it's beyond the door, you know it's a dog, right? Because God switched yeah? So there is nothing about the shape with the sounds, yeah? The sound don't give you the geometry. Only vision and touch give you the geometry. And this is why we got this result, that the ventral stream responds to touch and to vision in congenitally blind, late blind, sighted, in all of them. Okay? Now, so that was one case in which we said, okay, this is something that deviates from this concept of critical period and of specialization to vision. And then we were thinking, okay, what is the next step? The next step we thought would be very interesting because there is two animals, there is more, but that can actually reconstruct shapes in the world very good by sounds. And these two animals are bats and dolphins, right? You know how we usually say a blind as a bat, yeah? But bats are not blind, actually. They can see. When there is light, they use their vision. But when they're in the cave or in the night, or the dolphins in very murky water, they turn on the sonification method that they took sounds and they develop in evolution to recognize very accurately the visual environment with sounds. And for example, bats can send a lot of sounds and analyze them, and they developed in evolution to have this specialization, and they can know if it's a small rock or it's an insect and to eat it or to avoid it. So really, you can create the geometry and the objects in the world around you also with sound. So we thought maybe it could be really cool if we could now teach blind people to do the same thing with an algorithm that we developed, okay? So the idea is the following. The father of this field of sensory substitution, when I entered this field in 2007, was that Paul Bacharita had this idea that if we can take, it's every couple of minutes, we need to do this, I don't know why, but anyway, I would explain, I don't need the presentation, but basically what he said, if we have a blind person and he's very good in touch and very good in sound, maybe what we can do, we can take a camera and project the information in touch, okay, to him. And he created this very beautiful technology called BrainPort. I don't know if you ever stumbled upon it. And in this BrainPort, they took an image and they projected it in touch. Now, the reason I decided this is not that great. Okay, we'll do everything more quickly, so before it disappears. So basically what we tried to do, we took an image from so Paul Bacharita did it with touch, but the resolution is very low. We wanted the resolution that will enable them to see a whole face and recognize the person using sound, using music. And so what we did was to take an image, and in the image we encoded in sounds. What you see here is the horse, and what you see here is different pitches of sound, and this is time, and it's like a little bit like a radar that it represents. You see that in the sound here, there is all the shape information. To explain to you a little bit better how it's done, so this is a blind person that looks at this, and he can recognize the object, so it's an apple, the location where it is, so he can take it, and also the color, so he can pick up red apple from green apple. And all of this he can do only with a lot of sounds that he receives to the ear, okay? This is the algorithm called iMusic. Now, why people can manage to see with the sounds when they don't have any input from the eye? All the input is coming from a camera and using the sound system. To explain this a little bit, I like to give this example of the FedEx, yeah? This is the input, all of you get the same input, right, of FedEx. Now, how many of you saw this logo before, but now for the first time see that between the E and the X, there is an arrow? Okay, raise your hand if you see the arrow for the first time. Let's see how many. Everyone almost, 90%. Now, I want to emphasize what happened here. First of all, can you now forget about the arrow? Can you? No, it's there, right? You cannot ignore it. The second thing is that from now on, from this day until the end of your life, each time you see a FedEx truck, you see the arrow jump on you. And the second thing is, do you remember this guy came from Israel, talk about the sound, creating blind to make them as bats and dolphins, right? So, but what is really important here is that I told you one sentence. I told you between the E and the X there is an arrow, and your vision changed forever, right? So this showed us that it's not just the input from the eye. we see with a combination of this processing in this 30% of the brain and the input. So actually what we try to do is we make a bypass. We do have in the congenitally blind and the late blind or anyone else, we have this 30%. Everything is fine here. What is not okay is the pathway from the eye or inside the eye to the brain. So we take the image, we project them into the ear, then it goes to the sound system, and then maybe it's processed now in the visual system, just we make a bypass, yeah? Like there is now demonstration and the road is closed, we go in a different road, okay? And this we can do in any age. Okay, so how does it work? Never mind, you fix it, and I will do the intro. So how does it work? Let's start with something simple. Let's say I want to draw a diagonal line, okay? Diagonal line from left to right. How I do it with sound? Pitches that are high will be have high note, T. Pitches that are middle will be P, and low, T. So let's sing together since we don't have a computer. T, D, 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 D. Right? It scans from left to right, and it gives me, now I'm a blind, I listen to it, and I know this is a diagonal line. So this is the first lesson. This is the first minute. Now let's say, how do we you know what, maybe we can try to, never mind. Great, so now let's listen to the actual algorithm with the sound. So actually it played in a pentatonic scale because we know from music that pentatonic scale, any combination sounds good, sounds harmonic. Okay, so this is why we choose it. Now let's try to draw together a smile, okay? So let's say a smile. We start with the note, sing with me. T. I just need to check that the translation really works, yeah? T, T. Now let's draw together the smile. T. Very good. Now let's do a smile again. T. Very good. We don't need a computer. Okay, now let's do a sad face. T. Great. In different face. T. You got it. So this is the first minute. Now we continue this training. Just to give you a gist of it, for example, line up, like V1. V1 is doing lines in different orientation, right? So let's do a line up, line down. Very easy. Concept of thickness, if something is very thin or very fat. There is more, it opens the line, and so on and so forth. So what about color? What we did for color, we took different timbres, and we have consistent. So if it's more piano, it's more red. If it's a trumpet, it's more blue, and so on and so forth. We teach them this association. So I don't have time to teach you this, but maybe you can hear here that the circle is the same, the shape is the same, but the third one have a different timbre. Yeah? So we teach them this, and now we don't do it for 2 minutes. We do it for we do it for many hours. And what you see here is congenitally blind, looking at my PhD student, Ella Straim-Amit, that is now in Harvard, and she recognized if she's smiling or surprised by analyzing the sounds. This will be very important soon. Now we have Hamutal reading a word. This is in the Hebrew alphabet. This is Sigalit, another congenitally blind, looking for her shoes in the room. And now colors. So let's see, this was very quick, so let's see another movie. And again, I would explain to you. All these people are congenitally or late blind. They get the sounds from the camera, like bats and dolphins. They analyze the shape, and now they know that here it's a surprise face. You see here the sound sonification. So we really, after 40 hours, they can really use, like bats and dolphins, the sound system to use it. Here is the apple example, yeah? We have again, Hamutal. She picked the red, and you see they put it in the camera, not in the eye. And this is a late blind. This is actually... So actually, this is the last person was a very interesting guy. Was the first to receive the implant, the second site implant. He made the surgery in Italy, and he heard about our method, and he was happy from the implant, but he felt it gave him a very low resolution. He could not do a lot with it. Just find the door, or if the light is on, off, and so on. And he read about the research, and he came to the lab to train. He's a late blind. And it was amazing because he started using it more and more. And what he described, since he's a late blind, is that as he trained with this method, in the beginning, he only experienced this information here. After like 2, 3, 4 hours, he understands the information come from the world, not from the ear. And after several more hours, over 10, 20 hours, he said he started to have visual hallucination of what he's seeing. So if he grab an apple, he suddenly see the image of the red apple, and he reported that he feels like it's awake. What he said here, it's awaking my visual system, okay? So this was basically the behavior, what we did, the technology and training. Now, of course, I want to say this is a very slow vision. It's very difficult for them in the beginning, very cognitive. It's not a miracle. It's not that now they are like bats and dolphins go and, but we think that as they improve the technology and the training, it will be like bats and dolphins. But right now it's a very slow, it's not very good for moving objects fast and so on and so forth. We developed some other technology, but I think I want to talk more about the brain. And what is really interesting is that what is unique in our lab is that together with all this, we scan the brain of the people while they learn it, okay? And what you see here is a very interesting image. You see here in red the ventral stream all the way from V1 to LOC, so all these areas that recognize shapes in the world, and these areas in the back that build the image based on the input from the eye. And what you see here in blue is here is the A1, primary auditory cortex, is a cortex that have a map for high, medium, and low frequencies. So this is the sound system, right? Now, what you will see in a minute is a computational algorithm we developed that scan the brain every second. And since the vision is very slow, we can see how the information goes in the brain when they learn to, for example, read a word in the sound, recognize facial expression, recognize the shoes, and so on and so forth. And what you see here is an average of a congenitally blind individual. So all the people that you see in this movie never had vision in their life, okay? And what happened is that when they start using it and they cannot understand it, the activity only, I don't showing it to you, but that's the results we get. The activity is mainly focused around the blue areas. But when they train with this and what you see is that when they start looking at a face or reading a word, the activity goes from the ear into this frequency area. But when they actually build the image and respond, what they saw, they read the word, they read the facial expression, they tell us what is the object, it's this visual cortex that lights up. So again, it goes back to this Hubel and Wiesel type of concept. This cortex never got vision there. In principle, this neuron were supposed to be unemployed or die or maybe do something else, maybe language, but actually what they do is that after 10, 20, 40 hours of training, they suddenly start to respond to the visual input. And I think this is very important also for rehab because we used to think about people that were born with cataract, at least in the 70s, 80s, that there is no point to remove the cataract if it was not done when they were babies. You need to do it very quickly. But in India, in Ethiopia, in many, many countries, they don't have access to this surgery, or they don't have money. Even if they have access, they can afford $20, but they cannot afford. So there is a lot of people there. And in principle, according to Hubel and Wiesel, there was no point in doing the cataract removal. But we see here is that all this real estate can create the topography even when there was no visual experience. And people started to do more and more of this cataract removal in the age of 20, 30, and so on and so forth. No, the only way is to do this. And basically you can, and what they saw is that initially they have very poor vision, but with some training, you can really recover almost fully their vision after a year of training or half a year. So it's really also have some, you know, implication for clinics. Now, what I want to show you next is that you remember that I told you that in addition to all these areas that build the topography, build the image in the mind, the eye, in the brain, in this primary visual cortex, we have all these areas that are specializing for objects that are very important for us, faces, body images, objects, and so on and so forth. So what we wanted to do next is say, now they can recognize a tool, they can recognize a face, they can read using this method.